Hello everyone, tonight we're going to be talking about x-rays again. Today we're going to read AP lateral and scaphoid views of the wrist. So again, just wanted to say that these views are from the app Sublux, which is a great radiology app. I've been using it, it's nice. So here we have an anatomic view of the wrist. It's very beautifully colored. I wish it came like this from radiology. It would be much nicer, but it's not. So we need to learn how to read these, and that's the point here. So just some quick overview anatomy. The bones of the forearm, you have your radius in red, your ulna, and each of those have a styloid process. And I'm hoping that you can see my mouse because I'm pointing to these bones as I go. Um, in blue here, so in terms of the carpal bones, I think of the carpal bones as having two rows. So you have four on the bottom, four on the top. You have your scaphoid, your lunate, your triquetrum, your pisiform. Your pisiform is kind of superficial to the triquetrum, and it has a little bit of overlap with the hamate there, as you can see as well. And then, so that's the bottom row of four. The top row of four includes the trapezium, the trapezoid, the capitate, and the hamate. And exactly where this line is pointing to, actually, that's the hamate. And a funny mnemonic, actually, a little not safe for work mnemonic, but it's fun to remember these carpal bones. When I learned it, it was some lovers try positions that they can't handle. So that one always stuck with me. So the carpal bones were never that hard to remember. So here's that same radiograph. Again, not as pretty as the nice colored one, but that's why we need to learn how to read it. So first thing you want to look at is check out your ulnar styloid process. Make sure it's intact. A lot of times you can have a very subtle fracture in there, perhaps a transverse one or an oblique one that it's pretty easily missed, and it could be even super hairline. And if you don't pay close attention, you can miss it. So start there. It's a nice prominent structure to start with. Next, you want to move to your radius and make sure that the articulating surface of the radius is intact. You don't see any cortical disruptions. So the radius has your scaphoid fossa and your lunate fossa. And you want to make sure that that articulation is intact. Next thing to note is to make sure that the distal part of the ulna does not extend further or more distal to the articulating surface of the radius here. So if you can kind of imagine a line coming across, that red line would be just a bit more distal, perhaps a little bit of overlap with that green line, the distal part of the ulna. You also want to take a look at the scapholunate distance, which is obviously the distance between your scaphoid and your lunate bone. Normal distance is then less than 2 millimeters between those bones. And additionally, you want to take a look at your scaphoid for any fractures. We're going to go into the scaphoid view in just a bit, but this is a bone that's high risk of avascular necrosis and non-union if there's a fracture in it that you don't recognize, and it's very easily missed. If you are examining an AP of the wrist in a pediatric patient, you want to inspect the radius for any angulation or bulging. You can get a couple type of fractures, especially in a kid. A torus fracture, which is a buckle fracture, or a green stick fracture, which is basically you kind of snap the bone kind of like a twig where one part of the cortex snaps. That's why it's called a green stick, because it kind of snaps like a stick. So here we have a lateral view of the wrist. Your important anatomical landmarks, of course, your radius, your lunate in the lunate fossa of the radius, and the capitate here. Here's again the not as pretty image as the colorful one. First thing you want to look at when looking at a lateral of the wrist is to ensure that there is proper palmar tilt between the radius and the ulna, essentially. Normal angulation here, if you take a look at this angle, it is an acute angle of anywhere between 2 and 20 degrees. And you also want to take a look at the dorsal surface to make sure it's smooth, making sure there's no fracture particles or fragments, and that the articulating surface, again, we looked at in the AP view, and we'll want to look at the in the lateral view, the articulating surface between the radius and the lunate. You want to ensure proper anatomic alignment of your lunate and your capitate. And then lastly, you want to check for any bony fragments in the dorsal compartment here. So here's your dorsal compartment, your volar compartment. You want to make sure that you don't see any X or foreign bodies in that area that might be indicative of some fragmented bone. So now we're going to talk about the scaphoid view of the wrist, and this does have an important note here that this here is an oblique view of the wrist. A true scaphoid, I have written out here on the left, a true scaphoid view of the wrist is with the wrist extended to 30 degrees with ulnar deviation at 30 degrees. So extended to 30 degrees and ulnar deviation to 20 degrees. And that really depends on the radiology department that's taking the images and probably varies from hospital to hospital. So taking a look at this image here, you obviously want to look at some important anatomic landmarks, namely your scaphoid bone outlined in blue here, the styloid process of the radius, and the ulna as well. So you really want to inspect this scaphoid bone carefully. Like I said just a bit ago, the scaphoid fractures are very easily missed. They can be very subtle, and they can lead to avascular necrosis and non-union, and ultimately lead to a dead bone and can lead to some pain. And typically, with a scaphoid fracture with avascular necrosis, the patient would feel pain in the anatomic snuff box. So anytime someone's complaining of pain, you definitely want to palpate in the anatomic snuff box. You also want to take a look at the radius in this view, in the scaphoid view, including the process. And those are quick and dirty how you read an AP, a lateral, and a scaphoid view. It was a nice little compact, discrete way to look at them. So again, I like to go back over it quickly. Repetition helps me. So you want to look at the ulnar styloid process in an AP of the wrist. Ulnar styloid to the articulating surface of the carpal bones with the radius. Make sure that the distal surface of the ulna is not distal to the articulating surface of the radius and the carpal bones. Then you want to check out your scapholunate distance. Should be less than 2 millimeters. Always inspect the scaphoid. In children, look out for funny fractures of the radius. In terms of the lateral view, you want to take a look at your landmarks, capitate, your lunate, and your radius, of course. You want to look at your palmar tilt of the radius. Make sure that that angle there is between 2 and 20 degrees. Make sure you got no bone fragments. The dorsal surface of the radius is smooth. Again, take a look at your articulating surface of the radius. Ensure anatomic alignment of the capitate and the lunate, and make sure you got nothing going on in your dorsal compartment of the wrist there. And then you have your scaphoid view. Again, perhaps you'll have an oblique view depending on what hospital you're in. But carefully inspect your scaphoid because of the risk of non-union. Take a look at it, and also look at it in relation to the radius. That's what I have tonight. Be back with more very soon. Tune in, and see you soon.